One of the things that has me the most concerned right now is the dollar's attack. So you've got the BRICS nations. For those who haven't heard that acronym before, Brazil, Russia, and India. China and South Africa are meeting, and I know this has been going on for quite some time. So I'm not sure if I should be overly concerned about it at the moment. But, again, going back to those indicators that point to a transition from Phase 5 to Phase 6, do you think there's anything to be concerned about? Things we can plan for when we look at the big cycle as we view this particular time with the dollar assault. Is there anything in the big cycle that can teach us how to deal with this moment? It just keeps happening. The decline of the British pound as a reserve currency, and before that, the decline of the Dutch guilder as a reserve currency, all happen for the same reasons, which are, two things going on. First, they're holding all of these dollars and the stuff we discussed about what's going on, and then there's the weaponization of the dollar through sanctions. In other words, the United States' greatest weapon to use, apart from its military weapon, is his sanctions, and so sanctions mean you freeze other assets. You freeze assets. Those assets are the bonds, and So that happened with Russia. And there are threats of it with other countries, China, and so on. And there's kind of the thinking, well, if I hold the bonds, can I get out? So, for example, the United States portion of world commerce has fallen while China's share of world trade has expanded to become higher. And so if two countries are dealing, let's say Saudi Arabia is trading with dollars. Why do they use monies to accomplish this? You know, there's no compelling reason to go to the dollars. And you know they don't know that, so they're concerned about holding the dollars because they might get a tax break. As a result, more transactions in other currencies are sanctioned, and the dollar's role as a reservoir of wealth changes. Think about it this way. Everyone wants a medium of exchange and a storehouse of wealth. So if everyone is using the dollar and world trade, you want to save in dollars because you say, okay, now that's the thing I spend in, and I save in the dollars. But as the share of world trade declines, you want to save in dollars less and less. Why aren't they categorizing who they like? China has a larger share of global trade. Traditionally, countries with the world's reserve currency have the largest share of global trade and capital flows. And as the US has declined and there is concern about holding it due to sanctions, imagine how the Chinese must feel about having a lot of money and treasury bonds. You know, I'd be concerned that I'd want to be treated like Russia. Be handled. I'm not something I'd want to hold as a safe asset, and other countries may fear being sanctioned. And for all of these reasons, they're less inclined to hold. And when we call dollars, what we really mean is dollar debt, because you don't hold dollars, you hold dollar debt, and that's a pro. What exactly is a debt? It's a commitment to actually receive money. So, getting out of those things and transacting in other currencies appears to be the safer option presently. To do for those nations, and so that's the dynamic at work, so it's not an attack on the dollar. It's more like I don't want to hold those things, and it's very similar to the British pound. What occurred was that the British had the war and were the most powerful empire ever in the globe. And then there was Globe War II, and they came out of World War II financially in debt. A lot of debt. And who held the loan? All of these countries held the loan because it was necessary. The residual from that, but they had a problem. They had a debt problem. And so they needed to print more money because it was too much of a squeeze. And then you had so it deteriorated. And then they sort of pleaded, please hold my dad, please hold my dad. They traveled to Commonwealth countries, which were part of the former British Empire. And then there was the Suez Canal incident, when there was sort of a battle and everyone realized, hey, wait a minute, that British Empire ain't the British Empire. And they're deeply in debt, and then they say, I don't want to own that debt, and the British pound collapsed. So that's how the mechanics operate. Okay, so looking at the US, and I don't want to be cheeky and say speaking directly to, the US government, but if I were to be so bold, if this is that predictable moment where there are actions that we can take as a country that will either help us keep the world reserve currency status, and there are actions that we can take that will help us lose the world reserve currency status, and there are actions that we can take that will help us lose the world reserve currency status. Will cause us to lose that status faster. Okay, you've got the BRICS nations. They're moving away from the dollar. That card appears to have already been played. I'm not sure whether there's anything we can do to make that easier, but speaking of printing, one thing I've recently heard, and this is a really fascinating concept, is that when other countries retain your money, they're not just hoarding cash. They have a lot of debt, and if we print money, we are effectively externalizing inflation, producing a devaluation of that debt for all of the countries who hold us. Now we're in a period of rising interest rates, which is forcing us to print, but also creating a really strange, difficult situation in which we need to raise interest rates as we print. But the reason we're having to print is because we're raising interest rates, so it's a very difficult situation. But, to return to your original point, it is how we are with each other. If we could bring people together in the center, we would like to persuade the US government to be very cautious about depreciating the currency. Is that a significant concept? It's simpler and more basic than that, but it's also more challenging. The reason cycles occur is that the next step is controlled by what happened in the previous stage. So we're in a lot of debt. You can't change the fact that we're deeply in debt, and if you ask, what could you do? I mean, two possibilities spring to mind. You could be wealthy, but you cannot use it. Financial fines are used to scare bondholders, but being financially strong demands you to not spend more than you earn, which means you must either cut your spending or increase your revenue. Okay, that's fine. It ain't easy. So, are we going to reduce our spending? What are you doing now that you've looked at it? Infrastructural initiatives. I'm not sure how poverty affects defense spending. So, what are we going to slash? Governments, like people, have basic economic principles, except that they may transfer money from one person to another and print money. That's all. So you have that gap when you look at this. You can close the deficit by taking money from some and eliminating others while spending little. Most governments no longer ask themselves, how much money do I have to spend? And then, how do I prioritize that? They think, I need to spend on this, I need to spend on that, and I need to spend on that, and they spend on it. And then they either produce a deficit or produce a surplus. And then you have to pay it back with hard money or printed money. And that's the situation. So when you ask, what could we do well? You have to get financially strong in a politically fragmented environment where everyone wants more. And you have to be a greater percentage of global trade so that everyone wants to use your currency and not scare the holders of those bonds with freezing their assets. It's a tall order right now. It has been abundantly evident to me in the last month since you and I saw each other how crucial the reason you keep returning to is how people treat each other. So, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer right now, but it does feel like the die has been cast. A small amount. I don't see how we can bring ourselves back from the brink because, to your point about being fiscally responsible, as if we'd have to get to the point where we make more money than we spend. I'd like to circle back to something. While you were speaking, you highlighted infrastructure, which made me think, okay, What are the things that we would need to go right? Everyone is aware, and I've heard you state that there will need to be modifications made to capitalism in order to bring about change. Back to a thriving middle class and the importance of a thriving middle class, and you've defined the three things that we need to do as a country or for any country to be strong. And you said 2 parents in the home, great public education, and equal opportunity. Where do you think we'll be on those? Do we seem to be heading in the right direction? Is it possible that we are heading in the wrong direction? Again, perhaps I aspired too much to having 2 parents in the house. It's definitely preferable to have 2 loving parents raising a family. That's great, but perhaps it's too much to ask. To put it another way, solid parental direction. Okay, you're raised well, educated well. You can go to a public school that educates you well. And you have good guidance. So you're well raised in a healthy environment. And not only do you learn skills and all that, but you also learn how to behave well with each other. So you learn civility. And so that you come out capable and civil to a land of opportunity in which you can, work and have a good environment. And really that's all you need if a society does that right. And I think you know where we are. The things that are going on. Education in a lot of public education is deteriorating. It's a real problem. And my wife works to help the poorest school districts, the poorest people in terms of highest per capita income, it's usually 1, 2, or 3. And in the state of Connecticut, according to the most recent poll, 22% of high school kids have either dropped out, or had absentee rates greater than 25 in our failing classes. So when they're in POB, they're in regions that don't have the things I'm talking about in terms of parents' nutrition and so on. And there aren't enough resources for them. For example, during COVID, we discovered that 60,000 students did not have computers or connectivity to take classes, and the government was not going to provide it. So philanthropically, we bought 60,000 computers and gave them to the kids. But we couldn't do that. So our society is, when you look at this, you see drug problems, city cleanliness, city education levels, mental illness, crimes, and so on. But you're not seeing that. You notice a lot of people fighting with each other, but not all of the time. There are wonderful places in the United States. Education, some of the best universities pockets. Some of which their neighborhoods. But there is this encroaching, so you see infrastructure breaking down. School shootings, I don't know, okay, so you decide how we do it. Watch the video to learn more about the warning about the impending recession, which we are probably certainly now in. In addition, remember that if you enjoy this video, you should demonstrate your appreciation by clicking the like button, sharing it with your friends, and letting us know your thoughts in the section below. Your contribution is necessary for the success of our content.